Hello, everybody. A little long time no see action here. Pump it up, a Kentucky baseball podcast. We're back on a beautiful August 19th in the Bluegrass State. Joining me in the KSR studios is my good friend Derek Terry. As we had to get in here and talk some baseball. Derek, I think we were waiting for roster building season to officially end, but it's not ending in any sport. I'm still portaling it. Multiple portals. I'm tracking multiple portals right now as we deal with some absolute madness here at the start of the fall semester across the country. The University of Kentucky, Nick Mingione's baseball club will be meeting up. Well, they're probably already meeting up, but they're planning out their fall ball schedule right now. They'll be getting out there and playing baseball. Derek, you actually, I believe, talked to the head skipper here recently. How was that conversation? And just what kind of intel did you get from that?
It's good. Typical for us to meet around this time of year. Had a story just put out about an hour ago talking about the pitching staff, and then have some other stuff later this week and next week. But there's always you mentioned it off the top, like it never really ends in any of these sports. I mean, you still have football trying to add guys here, and they play in 2 weeks here soon. Still might have some new players. So, just some intel with Jackson Susie and Ira Austin, I know we're going to talk about, but just breaking down the roster as a whole, which I think on the offensive side, will have a lot of familiar faces mixed in with some of the portal guys. Whereas with the pitching staff, some familiar faces back in the weekend rotation in particular, but in my opinion, a different kind of build from what we've seen in some previous years. So I know we'll dive into that, and that's pretty much what the focus of my conversation was with him. And then a couple big picture, ABS stuff like that that's becoming a college baseball, and he's got a new skipper. I know, a new boss. We've talked about. I know the other coaches have kind of had a chance to talk about their relationship with Jay Bat, obviously the Will Stein lookalike, the conversation that gets brought up. But, I have a story kind of talking about initial impressions with Jay Bat, because as we know, Nick Mingione and Mitch Barnhart, he was a very big supporter of Mitch Barnhart, and this will be for the first time. You have some of the other coaches, Craig Skinner, Rachel Lawson. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other coaches who have been here for a long time. I think Mingione falls in that bucket now. He'll be going into year 11 next year, so a change for them at the top. But yeah, all those stories will be out probably over the next week or so at Backhead Central.
Yeah, good deal there. It's baseball talking season, right? Fall ball is you get to talk about the team, and that's what we're going to do today. Just kind of go through basically the roster build and then what they have on this baseball team. Before we get into that, though, Derek, I just want to talk let's get it out of the way. Just the news of this week. The news of this week, if you haven't been paying attention, was basically Ira Austin and Jackson Susie, two relief pitchers. Austin, sidearm righty, Susie, kind of an over to the top left-handed pitcher. They could come back. They're class of 2022 guys. Only played last year for a year. Austin transferred in from New Orleans. Susie transferred in from South Carolina. But there's guys that could potentially be in that bullpen again. Derek, just what was your immediate reaction to that, and what do you think they can bring Kentucky if they can get them through this and get them to play? It seems like it's trending that way all across sports, that these players in 2022 are going to get eligible as of where we sit right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there were 6 players from last year's team that fell in this bucket. In addition to Susie and Austin, you had Tyler Cerny, Carson Hansen, Jack Bennett, and then there was one more pitcher, I believe I wrote down. Niall Adcock. Yeah, he got drafted by the Braves. So out of that group, though, Susie and Austin are the two that I think would come back, that want to come back next season if it works out. The one aspect of this that I'm not real clear on, you mentioned the 5 for 5, based on some of those court rulings, if that ends up falling in the way of the players from that 2022 class, and they will be able to come back. What I don't know, and what might be an extra element, is those two have been playing professionally. Ira Austin pretty much immediately, once the season ended, started playing in the independent league. I think he played with the Legends here in Lexington for a couple of games. But he's been playing with the Ogden Raptors since then. And then Susie's been playing with the team out of Canada, which is where he's from originally. He's not played as much. I think he's pitched in 9 games, whereas Austin's been like 16 or 17. So that could be another layer. They're independent leagues. There's not a lot of money being made in these leagues. That is an extra layer though to watch. As I've seen a couple of other programs. I know Texas A&M got a pitcher back today who will be in the 5th year. Ole Miss got 2 of their better offensive players back. The quick dive that I did on those guys, they hadn't been playing professionally. But I think the thing to take into account, and I think this is part of one of the lawsuits for maybe football or basketball. This 5 for 5 from the NCAA had not been in effect at the time that those guys decided, they thought their college baseball careers were over. So they began a professional career. I'm sure there'll be an argument there that they were making decisions based on what they knew at the time. And like I said, there might already be a lawsuit out there for that, but that will be an extra layer to watch. But it's definitely in play though, that they could be back. Matter of fact, I think if they end up getting eligibility, I really have no doubt that they will come back. And when you talk about the impact, Austin led this team in appearances with 25. You mentioned kind of a funky right. He's kind of the rare guy who's like almost matchup based as a right-hander. Like you don't always see that a lot.
Right. Yeah.
I do think Susie though, when you just look from a pure numbers perspective, as a left-hander, they just don't have very many. And especially if you have Cleaver in the weekend rotation, like that leaves, I think, only 4 other guys: Leighton Harris, Will Coleman, 2 freshmen, Joey Ansel and Cole McLean from Kentucky. So I think there's a very clear need for Jackson Susie on this team. And you think about the role he started playing there at the end of the year, Luckett. I mean, he's closed out the Wake Forest win there in Morgantown.
Yeah.
Believe he came back that Sunday night and only faced 1 batter, right? I think that was a matchup thing and during the meltdown for the bullpen.
Yeah.
But then, he got the ball on Monday there in the regional final and did a pretty good job over 3 innings, only gave up 1 run. So you could say he was one of those guys that was kind of coming on there at the end. And based on what we've seen out of a collegiate career, I mean, he would, I think, immediately come in and, as far as the bullpen arm goes, be their top guy. I mean, honestly, who's to say, though, that he might not factor into the weekend rotation as well if he were to come back in the fall and compete. I mean, I think there are enough open spots here, enough innings that that would certainly be a possibility. He was a midweek guy at South Carolina before he came to Kentucky, and then started that game there at the end. It's something he is familiar with, and I think probably more of a shot that he could slot into that this year. At the very least, I think he can compete there.
Yeah, that was kind of my first takeaway, was like, this guy could be a spot starter for you. I mean, heck, who knows how the season goes? You might need a midweek starter, right? Just plug him in there. We'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, I think just his versatility overall, I think, could be valuable for this pitching staff. And then I think what they thought they were getting with Austin, they got like in his last 7 appearances. It just took a while to get there. Like, he was awesome in the regional. He was very good in the last couple of times he would pitch in the SEC. It felt like he finally figured out just in time for the season to end. But if you could get that again, I think he could take on like a little fireman role. He was huge, I think, in that. If they would have came back and won that West Virginia game, we would have had to talk about him. I think he gave them 2 innings in that game and kind of just slowed everything down and gave them a chance, really. And then they end up tying it and unfortunately lost it there. But yeah, I think he could help. And just the depth, it would just give them depth. As we saw last year, not everything's going to go to plan. Some good unexpected things are going to happen. See Jack Sams. Some bad unexpected things are going to happen. We discussed those on the program over the course of last season. So just the depth in general. And then I think Susie, like, you can put him in the kind of that Logan Hastings bucket, right? Like, can maybe start for you, can maybe be a part of your back end of the bullpen, maybe be a mid innings guy, eat multiple innings. So yeah, I think that would be big for him. And then really big picture, it would kind of be 2 replacements, Derek, to what happened really on draft weekend. Unexpectedly, Kentucky, we knew Tyler Bell was gone, right? And then we had an interesting middle of the draft, I thought, with Jace Darnish coming back, with Grayson Willoughby announcing he's pulling out, Ethan Hindle, obviously. And then, Jimmy Anderson goes, I believe, in the 6th round to the O's.
Fifth round, yeah.
5th round. Robert Omidi goes, what was that? Was he 9th round, 8th round?
He was 8th, yeah.
8th round. So they go off. That kind of was none of that was, I don't think was really crazy. Tarnish came out, it was a little bit of a surprise, but nothing was crazy. But I think the two biggest surprises of the draft, you could argue, was Cooper Corcoran and the New Mexico transfer, big lefty, and then Connor Madison coming off the board. Like, I don't think anyone really saw that coming. And so that potentially you've got Austin and Susie, a righty and a lefty, to replace a righty and a lefty. That's how I kind of look at it. They were caught by surprise losing both of them, but they might be able to play some here. And so that was leaving draft weekend. I think overall you had to paint it as that was a good result for Kentucky, but there was some unexpected attrition, and it's attrition in what would be the bullpen, right? Which was what I think everybody was kind of worried about going into this offseason.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. That was pretty much my notes verbatim, actually, that I wrote down before we got on here. Yeah, low key. I mean, Madison and Corcoran were just, Madison goes in the 16th round to the Twins. Out of all the draft conversations I have, and I have a lot leading up to the draft, at no point was he ever mentioned as someone you watch. So I always, every year, try to throw the caveat that, like, you just really don't know what could happen in these draft days. And people in that position, like, they're going to sign for $150,000. They're almost always going to go. Because for Connor, I mean, even with the 5 for 5 that eventually passed, like, there's no guarantee he was going to be in that same spot next year to sign.
Sure.
And Connor, he didn't have a great year, but he did throw a lot. And I think he was someone that realistically you could see being better in his second year in the program. So, I think he was going to have a pretty big role in the stat. I would have put him in the same bucket. Like, he would have. He had some starting experience this season. South Carolina notably was very good. Had some other bad starts. Arkansas comes to mind. They got down in a huge hole in that first inning. He couldn't get out of the first, but I think was going to be competing. And then, Corcoran, just when you look at how it played out, like they didn't replace him with another lefty. They took Dylan McIntyre, a junior college pitcher from Ryle High School, who had gone down to San Jacinto Community or Junior College in Texas. And, Susie would be a way to kind of back channel that in a way that that they weren't going to before. But yeah, I mean, like you said, you pretty much had either had unexpected good news or things had played out as you probably would have thought up until it hit the 16th round. And then it was like, when Madison went off the board, I mean, that was a pretty big surprise. So totally agree with you, though. I mean, one of the ones I would say I missed going in, I remember there was a poster on KS Board. I was texted you after, who more or less was wondering why we hadn't talked more about Tarnish. And I had not really heard much to suggest that he was truly in play to come back. I'd heard at one point in the summer that, that there was going to be, some NIL budgeted for him if he did decide to come back. And then he's, one of the first ones to actually withdraw, outside of Hudson Brown, who I think is easy to forget about Hudson just because so early in the summer, he decided not to even go through with the draft process. He might've been the one who, he probably would have come off the board after Jelkin, and around that range, fifth round, so 5th to 7th round, maybe something like that. But yeah, getting Tarnish back, I mean, that was a huge deal. And then they were able to, keep Alex Kelsey as well, who I think we all thought had been committed to replace Tarnish in center field. So it adds to the outfield depth. Will make for an interesting fall, how they choose to use those guys. Because, I mean, you can remember at a point last year, like, Tarnish was out there in left. I don't know how many games he actually played in left, but in the fall, he was absolutely out there, where Scott Campbell had been playing center field. Well, Marcy had played some center field. So I think Tarnish probably locked in at center, but, if Kelsey comes in and, they like the look of Tarnish in left and Kelsey in center, then we'll see if that's what they ultimately go with. But Hindle, that was the one that I think early on in the summer, like immediately after the season ended, some concern that, he was leaning towards just wanting to start a pro career. And I think the 5 for 5 really helped someone like him, where he'll be able to come back this year, still have some leverage once the season's over. But if he can kind of replicate what he just did, then surely he'll be going off the board in the top 10 rounds. So And unlike last year, I know he ended up playing a lot of defense, kind of injury related. He ended up making most of his starts playing a position as opposed to the DH, which is where he was likely heading once the season began. I do think he'll come into this season, one of these guys who'll probably start 50-plus games out in the field. So that'll help his draft stock as well. And it was good for Kentucky that, there was no unexpected, nobody ended up throwing a lot more money at him. So, I mean, I'm sure this is what we're transitioning to, but I mean, if you would have told me, I always try to think about these things in terms of like, if I was still sitting in that press box in Morgantown and he told me that, like, I would not have thought that Tarnish, Brown, and Hindle all still would have been on the team next season. So I think in that regard, like, they did very well, especially with the position class that they're bringing in. So this should be a team that I think as we leave the summer and begin to look at the fall, it's an offensive oriented team at this point.
Okay, let's just shift in. Let's shift into that before we get to the pitching staff. So, like, obviously, you've got the big three, like you talked about: Hindle, Jace Tarnish, Hudson Brown. Like, I don't know if that's going to be 1, 2, 3 in the order, but it's probably going to be 3 of the first 4 would be my guess when the games get here. So, like, who fills in where after that, do you think? Who are some guys that are maybe you could pencil in as starters right now? And maybe what are some position battles everyone needs to watch here, Derek, but within fall ball, and then when we get February, March, when they try to figure out what's what with this baseball team?
Well, as opposed to other guys that I think you got to go into thinking this fall they're locked in as a starter, Braxton Ventleave.
Right,
For Braxton,
easy to get lost.
Yeah, for him, it'll be, he didn't play a ton of right field last year. It's where he ended up in the regional. Can he make strides defensively? If not, I think you'd feel good about him as a DH. But the two position battles, I mean, I think for the first time in a long time, really going back, I mean, you could say this whole decade, honestly, from 2000, if you throw out the COVID season, which, they barely played, from 2021 into this past year, they have had a fantastic run of shortstops, 2 draft picks, both from the same high school, both to the same organization, with Ryan Ritter, who was here in 21 and 22. He goes into Grant Smith. I think a great evaluation from, I guess you could say the prior staff when Will Coggin was still here, but Minjam was still the head coach. But like Grant Smith here for 2 years, he's Gold Glove finalist, and then you have
solid,
Then you have Bell, who is all around clearly the best of the group, goes in the top 10, second highest draft pick in program history. On paper, we'll have to see because, it's the one position on the team you can expect they're going to take a pretty big step back. It doesn't mean the replacement will be a bad player necessarily. It's just with what Bell was able to give them over 2 seasons, both offensively and defensively, it's going to be really difficult. But the 3 to watch there, Caden Cloud, who will be the most familiar if you watched the team last year, he'll have a big chance. He played third base primarily last season, but he'll be competing at shortstop. And then they brought in Owen Lee from Tennessee Tech. We talked a little bit about Owen, and I believe Lee Ellis was committed to, right, by the time that I think when we did the last pod.
I think we did it before Lee Ellis committed.
Before, okay.
Yeah.
So Lee Ellis from essentially the Jimmy Anderson replacement. Jimmy ends up going to the Orioles, like we said, and Lee Ellis he played shortstop some. Originally started out at South Carolina, transferred to Ohio State, played a lot more shortstop, I think, the year prior, and then had been a second baseman as well at Ohio State. So, I mean, but if you think about it, depending on where Hindle ends up, like, you're having to replace Luke Lawrence as well. So, I mean, you really have both middle infield spots open. It's just more of an assumption maybe that since Hindle played quite a bit there last year, he could, just slide in there pretty easily. But shortstop, it's a huge position battle, I think. I mean, just for the first time in a long time, it's a little unclear how that's going to shake out. And then the other has to be catcher,
Yeah.
It's an entirely different group. So, we did a pre-draft pod last time. Carson May was one of those guys who could have gone either way, but they got him to campus. But Braden Ricketts from Indiana and Riley Jackson are the other 2. If you look at their college careers, Jackson caught more in 2025, kind of ended back up at catcher in 2026 because of an injury. He had been playing a lot of first base, and Ricketts primarily a DH. So, like, I think it'll be interesting to see, I think you probably assume Jackson, just because of the experience, is probably the front runner there. But even up at the Cape, he was primarily a first baseman. So I'll be curious to see, like, that was a position they had to replace every single player from last year, all 4 catchers, including, if you want to throw Ryan Schwartz in there as a catcher, he ended up being like the emergency guy. Well, they're all gone. So those are the 2 that I think just too early to even probably form a true opinion of who it's going to end up being. And it might be a position throughout the season if, somebody can't lock it down, that they give a few players, chances. But depth-wise, if you look at this build, I mean, when Tarnish coming back, they have a lot of outfielders, because you're kind of in a position now where, like, Brody Crispin, who I think is one of their better transfers, is he going to be a right fielder? Is he going to be a potential DH?
Yeah.
I think you have 4 good options there. And then you can factor in, too, like Caden Powell, the freshman, who I like a lot. I mean, I think there's a real shot that Caden Powell could show up and hit his way into the lineup. He could be an outfielder. Maybe he's a first baseman. You can always fall back on a DH. But I really like the outfield depth. I think the corner infield depth is good. You got to assume, Hudson Brown's going to be the first baseman. Is it Caden Platt at third? Could it be Ethan Hindle at third? I bet it's probably one of those 2. But then it's like, as the middle infield shake out.
And Jackson gives you a quality backup first baseman, too, if something were to happen to Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. He's played there. Even Hindle could end up being a first baseman if you really had it. So I think they have really quality depth in certain spots, and it'll just come down to, who can win the shortstop job. How reliant can they be? I mean, this has been truly, if you follow Kentucky baseball since Nick Mangione has been the head coach, and really even before him, like defensive minded shortstops who you can count on to make the routine plays throughout a season. Like, that's really just been a given. And we'll see if that's the case this year. I mean, I think this will be, like I said already, for the first time in a long time, who ultimately ends up there. Because Owen Lee is making the biggest jump out of everybody, going from Tennessee Tech to the SEC. Lee Ellis, spent that season with South Carolina, didn't play a ton, but, Big Ten, still obviously a better baseball conference than the OVC or whatever league it might be in now that Tennessee Tech is in. And then Cloud's at least been in the program. We've seen him. I think he was brought in as a potential shortstop out of high school. It was just always going to depend on how his body, how did he grow into his body? How strong did he get? Could he stick at shortstop? This will be his chance in the fall. Another one that I think if you look at his summer stats, like, he's played some shortstop, but pretty much more of a second baseman as well. So, like, I think that how it works out in the summer doesn't have to mean a ton, but it's just, you didn't really have these guys getting a ton of reps at the potential projected positions they're going to play at Kentucky.
Yeah, the just how they manage shortstop, fascinating. Because whoever plays there is probably batting at the bottom of the lineup, right? So, like, you need somebody there be consistent, good on defense. Like, I like the range Cloud showed last year in the arm, but he had a pretty memorable ending that wasn't great to the season with some of the errors there late. So that's unfortunate. And then Lee Ellis, SEC experience, was at South Carolina, played at Ohio State. Like, he's going to be somewhere there, I think, defensively. And then Lee's probably the biggest wild card of that bunch, just because he's got some pop and from that left side of the plate, but defensively, just where is he at there? So that's very, very interesting what they do at short, like the corner outfield, and like JP Peltier, like, where does he fit in all this? He's got some power numbers from there when he was at Wright State. So do they translate at all, and how do you fit him? And then, Van Cleve, like what's his position long term? Is he going to stay at right field? He can move to first base eventually. Just where is he, and how does he develop? And then just how does his bat develop too after, a really nice, what was it, last 15 games of the season? He was just awesome for them. So all that, how's all that shake out? But I look at it though. I look at this potential top 4, Derek, and this was just my kind of lineup projection when I wrote it up. Tarnish, Van Cleve, Brown, Hindle. Well, I think that team's going to score some runs would be my prediction. If that's the top 4, and then 5 through 9, like, you can kind of shake it out however you want. I'm pretty intrigued by Kelsey. Where do they put him? Because a guy of his profile, Nick Mingione, hasn't been afraid to like bat that guy third in the lineup. You know what I'm saying? Guy lay a bunt down, slap hitter, just guy who's going to create base path traffic, which is what Kelsey will do. I mean, he'll be like the HBP guy this year, I feel like, for this team. So, yeah, where they use him and how they use him will be pretty interesting.
I mean, kind of two schools of thought with Kelsey. Like, I kind of like the idea of just, he and Tarnish are kind of similar in the sense that they're really kind of high contact guys, high averages. OBP is pretty good, but like they swing and they connect on a lot. But with their speed, I mean, they're probably going to be two of the fastest guys, maybe the two fastest guys in the order. So if there was a world where they hit 1-2, like, could you really try to load up on those guys getting on and then having Brown, Hendel, Van Cleve, whatever order you want to do that, just try to really produce at the top. But I like where you had him as well, that seventh, almost like a second, kind of setting the lineup at the bottom of the order. Depending on how Van Cleve at 2 is interesting. Like, he's the one that I would ask. Like, I would wonder, like, how far, because you want to give this guy bats. If he builds off what he was last season, he's got a really good chance to lead this team in home runs. He would, I mean, as of today, he would be my pick, I think, for just the natural pop.
I think any of them. My thought process is, all right, Tarnish, get him on base, and then let's have these 3 big boppers in our lineup back to back to back. And just, I want these guys when they're hitting home runs, I want a lot of them to be, more than solos, because Tarnish is going to get on base a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, because you see the world where Kelsey hits 9th, I used to see that a little bit where.
Yeah, I think when I was projecting it out, I had him there. There was a time where I had him there. And so I definitely think you could see that for sure.
It could be a way to still do what I was talking about while just switching it up a little bit. But my overall take, I mean, if you look at this, if you look at how the newcomers kind of shook out, like, I think the home runs is what stood out to me. Like, you had Ricketts hit 9 last year, Jackson hit 9 last year, Crispin hit like 13. Peltier, what do you end up like for his career? It's like 30 plus, right? So I mean,
yeah, he had 20 the year before, 25
and 15 maybe this past year or something like that, or 10. Might have been 10. I think he had 30 homers over the last 2 years, but they brought in guys who have produced. I mean, even Lee Ellis, your middle infielder here, back-to-back seasons, he's at 7. So maybe there's a slight regression at UK, but it's still probably going to be 4 or 5. Owen Lee, like, was one of the guys that had quite a bit of, I think he had 3 home runs in one game at one point at Tennessee Tech.
Yeah,
so
I think he had 9 his first year and 12 last year, 21 total, and under 500 plate appearances. So he's shown some pop.
That was one of the things I talked to Mingione about. I need to go back and fully transcribe it. But, like, to me, this feels like really for the first time they have, not for the first time necessarily, because I think if you look at 2024, they had everything as well. The best team in school history. They were very good, well-rounded offense. But there's speed in this lineup. There's guys who hit, high contact. Mentioned Tarnish, mentioned Kelsey. There's guys who can hit for power. I think Hudson Brown can tap into more power, but he's just a good all-around hitter right now. I mean, he's got really good plate discipline. Yeah, he's tough to get out. If they can keep him healthy, I think he's one that you come into the season feeling like he could be your best all-around hitter. Hendel, he had his breakout year. I'm kind of treating Hendel similar to how it was with Tyler Bell, where it was like, well, if Tyler Bell just repeats the same kind of season he just had as a freshman, then he's still going to be the best player on this team. He ended up being better as a sophomore, but with Hendel, it's kind of the same deal. Like, if Hendel gives you the same exact season, like, that's a very valuable player.
I think you would pencil it. Like, if you had an option, take a chance or pencil it in, I think you would pencil it in. Just give me that again in the middle of the lineup.
So I think this is a really deep, a chance to have a really deep lineup even. And we talked about it on one of the last episodes we did, of Pump It Up there at the end of the season, or at the very least we talked about it in Morgantown. But, like, that lineup by the end of the year, it was pretty nasty. I mean, they had a really good lineup there at the end of the season, and you're having to replace Bell, having to replace Lawrence. Like, those are tough players to replace, certainly. But I could see a world where kind of the all-around lineup this year ends up being a little bit stronger. And then he had Cloud 9th. Like, he's a huge one. Like, his development, I think, out of all these guys you talk about positionally, I think how it goes for him is one of the biggest storylines to follow. I mean, we talked about his K rate there at the end of the year. Like, it was just, he was running it way too high to really probably stick the way that he was. But there's real speed, power combo with him. I mean, I think, whenever he hits the ball, he hits it extremely hard. It's just, can he make more contact? Can he, be a little bit of a tougher out? We just talked about Hudson Brown being a tough out. Like, can Caden build on what I still think, all things considered, was a promising first season in the program? And if he's a shortstop, I mean, that'll have huge defensive responsibilities, obviously. But I still see a world where Caden's, I don't think it's crazy to think he could end up being one of the better players on this team next season. But he's probably some more variance in there, though, versus the guys we've seen more of,
right,
like Tarnish, like Kendall, like Brown.
Yeah, just how they manage it early and getting everybody at bats is going to be interesting, because Caden Powell's the guy, like, early you want to see, like, just let's see him get 10 at bats here in the first month of the season, see what he can do with that, and go from there, and then figuring out roles in some of the competition, because I think there is going to be competition. We're trying to figure out the catcher stand. The catcher is probably the biggest one. Where else there is going to be competition is this pitching staff. And that's what we got to talk about. I think we know the offense has got a chance to be really, really good for Kentucky this year. But the staff is going to determine really kind of both the ceiling and the floor, to me. Before we get there, shout out to Roback. Roback came out with a new line of Kentucky gear. I think it came out August 13th, so been out less than a week now. Fresh new polos, fresh new quarter zips, fresh new everything. They got a few polos now with Kentucky on there, and Kentucky State, Kentucky logo, blue and white. So you check it out. KSR has a special going right now with Roback. You can get a certain percentage off. You can get some of that price slashed off with KS Sports, all caps. K Sports, excuse me, not KS Sports, K Sports, KSPORTS. Enter that in the code when you check out at Rollback. You can get some of them dollars shaved off if you're checking out some new gear. I know everyone's getting ready for tailgate season. Rollback's got some top of the line gear. Even for the golfers, they got some great polos, great to play golf in. I do it when I get out there. So go check out Rollback. K Sports is our promo code. Put that in there and help us out here at KSR and enjoy some of the great gear some Rollback has to offer. And Derek, I do want to switch over to the pitching rotation now here with Kentucky, because this is what, whenever I talk about Kentucky baseball, this is kind of what comes up. They're like, oh, I'm excited about the offense, but like, are we going to have enough pitching? So we get here right now, and we can just assume, we kind of talked about them already, but let's just assume Austin, Jackson, Susie are on this team. So in your opinion, where we sit right now, where does the pitching staff sit? What do you see as maybe some strengths and weaknesses, and maybe some key areas for this group heading into 2027?
I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. I felt like if you start at the top, this seemed like a show of faith. I thought this offseason had been Cleaver. I think with how they built this team, they're counting on a bounce back from him. And I don't think the logic's poor in that. I mean, you've seen Ben be successful as an SEC pitcher. Whatever happened last season, I think they could flush and move on. And I always think it was going to be easier to count on a bounce back from Ben versus going like realistically for Kentucky, although I think they clearly brought in very good players. They're one of the few programs, you've seen them tout it, and it's worth touting. I mean, they top 10 portal class, top 10 high school recruiting class. Like it's pretty impressive stuff for Kentucky baseball. Historically, portal's a newer thing, but when you think about the high school class, like they're typically not pulling in classes ranked this high. But it was always going to be tough to go out and just replace, a whole pitching staff. And you have a guy on campus who has had success, even this past year. I mean, it was mostly, probably more bad than good last year, but still, even against Tennessee, an NCAA tournament team, he kind of turns back the clock there and has a great outing, over 7 innings. So that was one of the big takeaways. Like, I think they're really counting on a bounce back from Ben. Mm-hmm. Nate Harris, same deal. Nate, had an injury last year, missed a month. I think that game against West Virginia is almost in a way just kind of encapsulated his career, where there's some really good moments in there, and then you look at the final product, ends up getting chased there, I think, in the fourth.
Just feels like the floor is lower than you want it to be.
Yeah, and like if you think about the returning innings, Ben, I think ended up around 46. Harris right in that same range. I think they might have only been an inning or two apart. So
I think that's right. Yeah.
Both guys who threw more the year prior, but there's a lot riding on those two. That's my main takeaway for the pitching staff. Like, they need those two to be good. The other kind of thing that I think about going into the draft, Luckett, I felt like, and I'm not necessarily comparing what their results would have been, because I think Jackson Jucken would have been, if you only could have picked two between Jackson Jucken and Grayson Willoughby, I think obviously Jucken would have been the much safer choice because you've seen him do it. I thought it was a big deal to get one of those two here, though, and they did. They were able to get Willoughby through, and he is, I think, truly a kind of a once-in-a-decade pitching prospect for Kentucky. They've not brought in a high school pitcher like this since Zach Thompson, in my opinion, and you see the innings that are going to be available. I think he will be the one that it's not – you got to think about kind of how it goes for Kentucky. Maybe it's like this at other schools too, but for Kentucky, this rotation at the beginning of the season has almost never ended up being the same at the end of the year. There's almost always somebody. There's a fourth or fifth starter. Like, I think that's pretty important to track on this staff. Cleaver was briefly taken out last year. That was more of a performance-based thing, whereas with Harris, like, he was just injured, so you had to have somebody else who could step in. The year before, 2 years before, Pooser ends up being, the top guy on the staff after not even starting the season in the weekend rotation. There are other examples of that throughout the time Dan Roselle's been the pitching coach at Kentucky. So, I think PJ Craig was brought in to be a plug-and-play kind of starter. And if you were to ask me today, I think it would be Craig, Harris, and Cleaver. But, is Willoughby that fourth guy? Because I think that's going to be really important this year. It was Logan Hastings. Like, who else can emerge if Susie is able to come back? Is it someone like that? Like, I think that the depth there will be just as important. So, and then the other big picture, I'll throw it back to you, but like, there's a lot of freshman arms in this class. They ended up with 7. I think they have 21 pitchers because Cameron Owens, who served as a pitcher the last 2 years, didn't throw a lot, but he's going to be an outfielder. That's what Minjian told me. It's where he played in the summer, so it's not like it was a huge scoop because he'd already been moved for the summer. But I think they have 21 arms on the staff, and 7 of those guys are freshmen. So you have Aiden Smith, who I like, but he's going to be out. He had knee surgery, so he's going to be out this fall. And then Ponatoski's playing football, so it's really a 5 coming into the fall with the JUCO, and then only four portal arms. So, like, when it comes down to it, man, like, they're going to have to develop some of these guys who have been here this past year.
Yeah. First things, like, Willoughby has got a chance to just be awesome. Everyone knows this. It's just how do they kind of ramp him up this season and get him – at some point, he's going to pitch in this weekend rotation, and I don't think he leaves it. But how do they get him there? Like, that's going to be something to watch, I think, the first 6-7 weeks of the season. So that's obviously going to change things when he gets there, but I don't think it's going to happen right away. And to me, after you get past that, like, that's the ultimate, like, you could classify him as a wild card. Willoughby, he's going to be some big role on this team.
Yeah.
Just don't know it yet. So it's hard to say, but to me, it comes down to two things. It is in-house development and it's evaluation for them. Did they hit on those 2 things? In-house development, can they get Nate Harris and Ben Cleaver back to what we saw more as freshmen or even better than that? Like a Chase Alderman. Can he take a step forward? Can a Berkeley Bounds? Can a Jack Sams, right, after a strong debut, can he develop? Like, can these guys they've got that have shown a little something, can they develop? And then the evaluation piece, like the PJ Craig, the Logan Hastings, the Mason Snyder, Dylan McIntyre from JUCO, Kel Hammer. Just did you evaluate like the way you thought did you evaluate to your standard, I guess? Like, that's what we're going to find out, because that's what's going to determine it to be. It's as long as we're going to get caught up, and I think even we're going to get caught up in some of the Cleaver and Harris stuff, which is important. But with the strength of this team, like what's going to determine, I think, the ceiling of this team, to be determined if it's a strength or not, is just some of this how much better these guys returning get and what do they get from this transfer class. Even if it is a small class, they're going to need Hastings to play a big role. They're going to need Snyder to be a really important piece in the bullpen. They're going to need Craig, I think, to eat innings for them. So those are guys they got to hit on. They cannot afford to bust on too many of those.
Yeah, I'll throw them out there pre-draft. To the pitchers that Minjun talked about. To me, Logan Sorrell, I think he's one that people really, I want to see it first before I really start, driving the train here. There's plenty of examples through the years of guys who, Tristan Hunter is another one who kind of got some late buzz, came here. You could see it with Tristan at times, wasn't very consistent, but could be somebody who ends up putting it together now at Missouri State, but not comparing Sorrell to him necessarily, just kind of the same deal where it's kind of a late bloomer, hard throwing right-hander coming in here. But I totally agree with you on that. Now, really, if you think about the velocity aspect, I mean, a lot of the guys who are going to be throwing the hardest on this team are going to be the newcomers. McIntyre, the sell on him coming from JUCO. This is a guy who's up to 96 there at San Jack. And then, really basically every right-hander they're bringing in this class is topped out somewhere like 95 to 96. I don't know if all of those have been in-game. Some of those might have been like the pitching lab stuff. Willoughby has, obviously. I mean, Willoughby's, he's been clocked 97, 98 in-game, hit 100 at the combine. Ponatoski, though, same deal. If he does end up, pitching high 90s, Sorrell, Sammy Swank, these are all mid-90s guys. But a big thing too, Luckett, I mean, this is going to be a second straight year where the numbers, we already mentioned, but the numbers of the lefties are lower. Like, I think Leighton Harris, the Lexington native, this is a big year for him. They're going to need, especially if Susie ends up not being here, Leighton's going to probably be the top guy out of the pen if Cleaver's still in the rotation. So, but within that, I do think Ansel and McLean are going to have a chance to get some real innings. I mean, they are the ones that out of everybody in the freshman class, the opportunity is going to be there for them. Coleman had a really rough summer. I don't look a ton into the summer stuff. It's one of those, it's almost like preseason results. If things go well, great. If not, it doesn't really tell the whole story. I mean, we watch Matt McLean every spring, be a phenom, and then the season starts. It's well, where is this guy? So, but with Coleman, it was a rough summer for him up in the New England Collegiate Baseball League. Just didn't throw very well, at least from the box scores. It wasn't great. So, they need Leighton in that same league the year before was extremely good. It just last year, despite making quite a bit of appearances, probably wasn't the year that he hoped for. So he'll have another huge opportunity this season, though. But yeah, I mean, I just think the build, it's what's talking about at the beginning. The build is just different this year where would you have been surprised if we were in Morgantown and I told you, hey, they're only going to take 4 pitchers from the transfer portal, 4 true portal pitchers? McIntyre kind of gets lumped in because he's a JUCO guy, but it took 4 guys from the portal. That surprised me at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think when you put it on paper, that is surprising. It really is. But also, they held on to some high school, mostly Willoughby. So maybe they had a good feeling about that before. So yeah, that did surprise me. It's interesting because you can make the argument that they just decided from a roster building standpoint. It's all right, we're going to be offense heavy this year. If you're playing out the budget and you're trying to figure out what how the pie was shaped when it comes to player compensation, they all probably leaning a little bit offense heavy here when they're getting all these guys back. So they're leaning into that, and it's just how can they build it out. But they've had good years, Derek, where you look at the pitching staff and it's kind of well, on paper it's we'll see if they can figure it out. And sometimes they have figured it out. They don't have the frontline starter like they had with Jelkin. At least we think Willoughby can be that. You just don't know if he's going to be that right away. So can they have a strength in numbers essentially? Can they have a bullpen be more consistent? But with that bullpen, can they have situations where they're not having to throw enough innings? I think one of the most important factors of the season is just, can they get more innings from the starters?
Oh yeah.
That was just, the bullpen didn't have a chance a lot of times because they were just having to cover too many outs over a weekend. They just need more more innings from the starters, but I also think they have just better collective depth as a entire staff. I think some important guys gained experience last year that they're going to have back this year. And then I think they've added some guys that are going to be a little bit more ready, I think, to compete at this level. Hastings has pitched in the Big Ten. Craig is a wily veteran who's pitched a ton. Snyder's the one where it's a big jump up, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how he does. But with those two specifically, I think they're going to be kind of ready for it. And I'd be surprised if any of them like where the bottom would just fell out. I think they're going to both bring in you a high floor.
I'd say the last big picture thing I have, and it's really a result of the 5 for 5 now that everybody has an extra year. This team only, which the MLB draft will always throw a wrench in it. Like, we need to see what happens with the CBA, because it seems like one of the things, Luckett, that the Players Association, maybe the only thing that the Players Association and the owners have agreed on so far, is making the players draft eligible after a second year, which would, right now you've had the cases of like the Tyler Bells, Schwartz was going to fall on that. He ended up not having the kind of year that was going to get him drafted, but like Willoughby falls into that. Moving forward, that could be everybody. But for now, with the 5 for 5, they only have 2 guys on this roster. Unless I've missed somebody, there's a chance I've messed somebody's eligibility up. But the only 2 that I have are Jace Tarnish and Ryan Mullen as guys who can't come back after the season. So, like, there's a chance that, especially in the pitching staff, that's what I was thinking whenever you were talking. Like, right now we're talking about a really deep offense, most likely. But depending on how it shakes out this year with the staff, you could be looking next year like Cleaver has another year. Harris will be draft eligible, but he could come back. Willoughby would be back. Like, you might end up looking up and saying this time next year, that's like, hey, this is a really pitching heavy staff. This could be one of the better staffs they've had. It's just kind of fluctuates year to year potentially. But I think that's an interesting thing about this build too. And I need to probably run down some other SEC rosters, see where they are. If Susie and Austin come back, obviously they'll double that, going from 2 to 4. But I just think that's one thing to kind of watch. Is just, it'll be interesting to see how much of this team, what does this team end up doing, first of all, then how many of those guys end up being back, because you can feel pretty good about the next few years. And that's kind of, whenever you take a big high school class the way that they did, when it's really highly ranked like that and you only lose one guy, Robert O'Meady, from that class, I mean, this could be the backbone of your program moving forward here the next few years. Yeah,
I think it just, this was a very good offseason for the program for a plethora of reasons. I think, Derek, they have a team that can extend that tournament streak, and I think it's a team that's good enough where they could host a regional.
I agree. I mean, it come down to the pitching. I'm with you. I mean, we're kind of baking in that the offense will be good. I just see too many guys who have been productive college hitters to think that they're not gonna, at least have. It's really, I would say this, like it needs to be the best offense they've had since 24. Not to say that like 25, there were some rough patches last year. Again, like I said, like earlier, I think by the end of last season, this was a really good offense. Struggled at points in the middle of the season, probably a lot of that due to injuries. You had guys playing all kinds of different positions, and you just hadn't really been able to settle on a group. Once they actually got to that point, when Van Cleve became a regular, when Brown was back from mono, like it was a really tough out. And I think you can build on that this year. At the very least, I think if you're tuning into Kentucky baseball games, like I think this offense will be fun to watch. And there might be a little bit more long ball, a little bit more extra base hits than what we've seen from the previous years. And it's going to come down to like, how good can this staff be? How many opposing teams can they get out? I don't know how many slugfest games there will be. I mean, I don't think that's how they want to play necessarily, but it might be a path. I mean, in a lot of ways, like that's how it ended up being this past year. I mean, I remember writing something about how many games they scored. Maybe it was kind of arbitrary, but I think it was like 7 runs. They were like averaging around 7 runs there those last probably month and a half of the season. And we see the record like probably wasn't as good as it should have been. So I think they absolutely, want to be better as a pitching staff while keeping a pretty explosive offense like they had towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and fans will get to see that explosive offense some here in the fall with some of these fall ball exhibitions. I guess a new rule here, kind of they got the double up so they can play 4 exhibitions this year. And there was some names on that exhibition list on that schedule. And I don't think people were who follow baseball, college baseball, were expecting to see, most notably uh, the Indiana swinging Kurt Signettis up there in Bloomington.
Yeah, I mean, just a little background. That was it was actually the 1 year I didn't cover the team, like the only year in the last 10 years that I did not write much about the team. Kentucky and Indiana used to play in the regular season.
Yeah.
A very, very tense regional in 2023. Basically ended up in Jeff Mercer, the head coach at Indiana, telling reporters in a press conference that Kentucky had canceled the series and that they would no longer be playing. And that's been true. They have not played in the regular season since then. It's been 3 seasons. But Kentucky's going to go up there to Bloomington.
Kentucky and Indiana got a series canceled? No way. Somebody got upset and said some stuff into a microphone? Really?
Yeah, there are no limits to whatever the sport is with Kentucky and IU. There's going to be some scheduling issues, but I thought that was very interesting that they were willing to go up there. I don't know enough about I wouldn't try to speak to that because I don't know the relationship between the coaches and whatnot. I do know just with Chase Sloan being at Kentucky, he played for Mercer at Wright State. Matt Morrow, who was on Kentucky's staff last season,
Coach
got hired.
I believe. Yeah,
got hired into a full-time role at Indiana. He was teammates with Sloan at Wright State. So that would be speculating on my part that maybe there's been more of a willingness to be friendly because Minjian has hired a few of his guys, and they're able to work this out in the fall. Maybe that's a step towards them playing again in the regular season. I have no idea. I have not heard a ton about the regular season schedule just yet. But that was the one. I mean, there's some good matchups here. Cincinnati will be the Prasco Park opponent. They played West Virginia last year. They've played Wright State. I was just talking about the year before. I know they played Michigan 1 year. So it's typically a pretty good opponent up there. It's not too far if you're in the central Kentucky area. It's a really nice way to spend a Sunday. Everything's free there, free concessions, free admission. If you have kids, a family, there's I don't really know how to describe it. Like there's like a lot of booths set up. I think there might even be some. It's almost like a little fair atmosphere out there. So it's a really cool thing if you're thinking about catching some fall baseball. Cincinnati's been really strong as a program the last few years, and then you do get the 2 home games with Xavier, who Austin Kuzno has history. He coached there with Billy O'Connor, the head coach. He's been at Xavier for a while now. Typically a pretty good program in the Big East, and then Morehead State, who they'll see in the regular season, I'm sure, as they always do. So I think it's really a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to see the team this fall, and going from 2 to 4, I think, is just another really good way. I mean, you're competing with football. Like, I know it's tough. I mean, you're not only competing with football, you're competing with the NFL, which is, the biggest entity in American sports. For 3 of those, the Indiana one is on a Friday night. So that one would be a little different if you don't have a whole lot going on Friday. Now that I think, is that the night of Madness though, Luckett? I don't know. Madness might be before.
No, Madness is early. It's early.
Okay.
Kentucky. I'll be in Norman that Friday for Kentucky, Oklahoma. Indiana, I believe, plays Ohio State.
Yeah. It'll be
next day.
That'll be. So I mean, you could get a pretty big crowd of people.
I kind of like this idea though of these Friday fall ball games the night before a big home football game. That to me makes sense. Maybe it's something Kentucky. Don't they do like an alumni
last year
day on a Friday night before a home football game? Like, to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, they did an intra squad last year before the Texas game. They brought back. It might have been homecoming weekend for the whole university. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was definitely for the alumni, for the baseball players. They came back, and Kentucky did hold an intra squad. Pretty well attended. Good inter squad. They threw some good pitchers out there last year too. So I'm with you. I mean, I think this will be. I mean, you might end up getting kind of a rowdy crowd potentially of people who are just in town and looking for something to do on a Friday night. So that'll be a fun one to keep up with. But I think what will help you, again, like certain controls or whatever are in these inter squads. Like, it's not like a real game necessarily, because they don't leave someone out there just to die on the mound if they're getting shelled. Like, they'll turn it over and keep the scrimmage going. But I do think it might help them learn a little bit more versus just having, so many intra squads. You'll at least have 2 more games now that'll feel more like a real game. And that's a great rule for college baseball. I think it went into effect. They passed it a couple of years ago, and now it's in effect. So something that they can take advantage of.
Yeah, and some of those position battles will Some of them could be help. They could help find the answers to some of the questions before we get into the season. Fall ball will be here before you know it, and after that, it'll be February. We'll be wearing our some winter gear up into the Kentucky Proud Park for some college baseball. It's right around the corner, and we'll be here to cover it all. We'll take a little break. We'll probably try to get on here maybe sometime after these scrimmages, Derek, just to kind of discuss what happened there. That I was thinking maybe Kentucky's bye week is week of Halloween, which is right after that. So maybe that week, put a pin in that. We'll be back on here with KSR YouTube channel to kind of discuss that, and then we're almost shifting into season prep mode after that. Going to be a fun few months here for the Kentucky baseball programs to kind of figure things out. And then I think when they get into the baseball talking season more, I think you're going to see this team pop up a lot on some of these preseason 25s. Make sure you're checking out all of Derek's work at Backhat Central. And we'll continue to cover what's going on with Kentucky in the 2028 recruiting class at KSR, our KSR Plus on our board. We got an off-season thread up and running where we're talking about the Kentucky baseball program almost a daily basis over there at KSR board. So check us out. But for next time, pump it up out. We'll see y'all later.